Welcome to the Shine Seeker Show, the podcast where strategy and soul come together because the best business plan in the world can't do its job if you don't believe you're worth building it. I'm your host, Katie Beth Schultz, founder of the Sunburst Strategies Co. and your Shine strategist. Every week, we're going from scattered to strategic with real conversations, real marketing strategy, and honest moments that remind you are already worthy of the shine you're seeking. Let's get into it. Okay, so I want to start with a question and I want you to actually answer it instead of just thinking about it or putting it in the back of your mind. How much is 1 hour of your time worth? Not what you charge, not what you wish you charged. What is it actually worth? Do you know? If you had to sit with that question for more than those 2 seconds that I gave you, we need to talk because that hesitation, y'all, it's not a pricing problem. It's really a worthiness problem, and it's costing you real money and real hours you are never going to get back. Time is the one resource in your entire business you cannot earn back, refinance, or find more of somewhere else. You can rebuild a bank account. You can rebuild a client list. You cannot rebuild the hour you just spent on something that was never going to move you forward. And as women entrepreneurs, business owners, and creatives, time is actually the only thing we can never get back. Today, I'm going to give you 5 truths about time, how to price it, where you're bleeding it out, and why protecting it is not selfish. It is the stewardship of the exact thing you were called to build. So time truth number 1, your time is inventory. And inventory you don't get to restock. Every business owner tracks money like it matters because it does. Almost nobody tracks time with that same precision and seriousness. And y'all, that's backwards. Money you can make more of. You can raise your prices, add an offer, take on a new client. But time doesn't work that way. The hour between 2 and 3 o'clock this afternoon exists exactly once. And once it's spent, there is no version of your business that gets it back. I want you to start thinking of your time the way a shop owner thinks of inventory on a shelf. You would never let inventory just walk out of the door for free, right? But a lot of us hand out hours constantly to the call that didn't need to happen, to the client who takes twice as long as she's paying for, to the task we could have delegated 3 months ago. Treating time like inventory means asking, before you say yes to anything, what this is actually going to cost me in the one resource that I cannot restock. Gloria Mark is a researcher who studies attention at UC Irvine, and she found it can take more than 20 minutes to fully regain focus after your attention gets pulled away by something else. And y'all, that is not a small number. That is real time gone. Every single time you let a task borrow your attention that it did not earn. You wouldn't pay an employee a certain amount of money for work that they didn't do, right? I think about this every time I remember how I started out. When I first opened Sunburst Strategies Co., I didn't charge what the work was worth. I mean, I told myself it was fine because I needed the experience under my belt. And honestly, in a lot of ways, it was totally fine. But then there came a point where I realized what I was actually building for my clients wasn't just social media management. It was a real foundation underneath their marketing and the beginning of what would eventually become the Shine Strategy system before I even had a name for it. So I went back to one of my very first clients and said, "Hey, look, this is growing into something bigger, and here is what that is going to cost moving forward." And it was a modest increase at the time, just a couple $100 a month. But we ended up parting ways over it. I honestly don't regret raising the price, but what I do regret is all the months before that, where I quietly gave away the real value of what I was building because those hours, they're gone. I cannot go back in time and rebuild myself for them. And that's the whole point I'm trying to make. You do not get a second chance at properly valuing hours you already spent. Okay, time truth number 2. What you charge is a receipt for what you believe your hour is worth. Here's a formula I want you to actually use. I want you to figure out what your hour is worth, not what feels comfortable to say out loud, but what it is actually worth given your skill and your results that are unique to you. Then figure out honestly how long the thing takes you. Prep and delivery and follow up included, not just the pretty part or the messy part, whatever way you look at it. I want you to multiply those two numbers. The number that what it is actually worth given your skill and results, and then how long it takes you, prep and delivery and follow up included. All right, multiply those two numbers, and that's your starting price. Some women in business skip that math entirely and price from fear instead. They think about what the client might say, what a competitor charges, what feels safe to type into a proposal without flinching. But listen to me when I say this, that is not pricing. That's just guessing. And every time you price from fear instead of from the real math formula that I just gave you, you're telling yourself that your hour is worth less than it is. It's diminishing your value, and you're doing it to yourself. And listen, that belief does not stay only in your pricing, it leaks into everything else. So if you remember, I said this is a worthiness problem that we've got to get figured out. Harvard Business School professor Felix Oberholzer-Gee talks about this with something called the value stick. The idea that what a client is actually willing to pay comes down to the gap between what they get and what they have to give up. So let me say that again. The idea that what a client is actually willing to pay comes down to the gap between what they get, so what they receive, versus what they have to give up. Hours worked are not part of that equation at all. Value delivered is. I learned this the hard way with a client pretty early on. We were about to take on a full rebrand, knew everything, literally building the whole foundation from zero. I looked at what the honest price should have been for that, and I completely panicked. I freaked out. I remember thinking this is going to be such a huge percentage of what this business brings in every month. And like, who in the world would pay that? So I talked myself down and quoted lower than the real math said I should. And how I made it work and how I made it seem okay was that I told myself it would even out over the life of the contract. But guess what? It did not even out. I ended up working incredibly hard for less than the work was worth. And then once the rebuild was done and things naturally got more streamlined, I kept the same price instead of restructuring it into a clear next phase package. And that really confused the client, whether they were consciously aware of it or not. They couldn't really tell what they were paying for anymore. And guess what? When the contract was up and it was time for renewal, they didn't renew. And that's on me and that's on the pricing, not on them. If I had built pricing around a build phase and then a different package around the maintenance phase as two honest, separate things from the start, I think that relationship, that business relationship would have gone very differently. And I think that honestly, that contract would have been renewed. Truth number 3. Every hour you spend on someone who won't commit is an hour you take from someone who would. I want to tell you a real story from my world because it made this time truth real for me in a new way. So, this was probably a couple weeks ago. Some of the women on my team were talking about a prospective client who wanted an enormous amount of handholding, info demands on incredibly short notice, and constant availability, but had never given a single real signal that she was actually ready to move forward to committing to the product she was considering purchasing. And the instinct in the room read, well, she'll probably bat eventually, so we should keep investing the time and just cater to her to some extent. And I remember thinking, like, how do we actually know that? Because we don't. What we do know is exactly how many hours we've poured into someone who has shown us over and over and over again that she's not decisive and she's not ready. Every one of those hours was an hour we didn't spend on the lead who was ready to move, the relationship that was already warm, and the follow up that would have actually closed a deal. So, what that's called, that's opportunity cost. And it's invisible until you give it a name, like I just did right now. The time that you spend on someone who will not commit is time you have already taken away from someone who would. That's the time truth underneath the story. The clock is not going to stop while you wait on someone else's decision. Time truth number 4. Your own indecision spends more of your time than any client ever will. We talk a lot about protecting your time from other people, but what we don't talk enough about is protecting it from ourselves. If you're chronically scattered, jumping from idea to idea, rewriting the same offer for the 4th time, circling a decision for weeks that should have taken you an afternoon, that's not a time management problem. I'm going to be bold here and say that it is worthiness or lack thereof showing up as indecision, and it is billing you by the hour. And that sucks. What is the shine that you're seeking? Because if you don't believe you are worthy of the thing you're building, you cannot make a clean decision about it. You'll hedge, you'll hum, you'll wait for more information you don't actually need. You'll ask 6 people what they think instead of trusting the one person who actually knows. And it's you. Every hour you spend circling a decision you already know the answer to is an hour you're stealing from yourself. The exact same way that indecisive prospect was stealing hours from the team. You're allowed to decide quickly. when you have spent the time and the energy and the money to build a foundation of worthiness. You're allowed to trust yourself. It's not reckless. That is what it looks like to actually believe you're worth building or creating the thing that you are. So here's where my own indecision cost me. I had a client once who had real money. Like, she was pretty much like, listen, money's not an issue. Like, if I want to do it, like, I guess tell me how much it'll be and like, we'll make it happen. And for a while, that made it really easy to talk myself into staying in a business relationship with her. Um, but the way we actually worked together did not fit. I let boundaries bend that should not have been whatsoever. So expectations crept toward being available around the clock. And I kept telling myself, you know what? I can manage this because the money's good. I thought it was good. So I kept waiting for a better moment to have the hard conversation, but I didn't have it. We just kept building until the relationship broke on its own. Looking back, I should have ended that relationship far earlier than I did because, y'all, not all money is good money. And every month I spent circling that decision instead of making the decision that I needed to was a month I could have spent somewhere where it actually fit. All right, and for the final time truth number 5, protecting your time is stewardship, not selfishness. There's this idea out there that guarding our time makes us difficult or cold or not generous enough. But that's something that we should shoot down absolutely. Like, I don't believe that, and you shouldn't either. You were given the specific calling, the specific business, this specific set of gifts for a reason. And the hours you have are the container that calling gets to live inside. When you protect your time, you're not being selfish. You are taking care of the thing you were entrusted with. Harvard Business Review has actually written directly about this. Executive coach Joe Sanok describes boundaries as the limits we identify for ourselves and then actually apply through action or communication. So, not a feeling, a practice. That misaligned client from Time Truth 4 is exactly what pushed me to get serious about contracts and boundaries from the very beginning, not after things have already started to bend. It's a little bit like raising kids. Like, you set the boundary and the expectation up front clearly before there's ever a reason to enforce it. Some people won't love a boundary. They might not even fully understand why it's there. But in the end, everybody, including you, ends up better for having it in place. That's what protecting your time actually looks like. Not a wall you put up after you've already been resentful. It's a foundation you lay down before you ever even need it. Here's another story that I want to tell you because this one is not about a client. This relates directly to the coffee chat that's not really a coffee chat. So I signed the Summer Strategies Co. on as a sponsor for a local women's nonprofit situation. um, Basically, I would get advertising to local women entrepreneurs. So it sounded like a great fit. I paid for the sponsorship as a real business expense. And there were other options available to me as a sponsor to get even more visibility by paying just a little bit more money. So, because this seemed like such a great fit, I decided to get close with one of the leaders there, and we started grabbing dinner outside the official gatherings to build the relationship. And I picked up the tab every time as a business expense. And for months, I kept asking about these extra opportunities to get more visibility for the Summer Strategies Co. And I kept getting the answer of some version of, we'll figure it out. Okay. So fast forward, she told me about a well-known local business owner who needed marketing help. And she said she was going to personally introduce us over dinner. All right. Was genuinely so excited. I was like, okay, like this time, this money that I've spent growing this relationship is finally paying off. We got to the dinner and shocking, I'm sure, to you, listener, the introduction never happened. Not that night and not any of the times after, when the opportunity was sitting right there in front of us. And that was the moment that made it clear to me. I was pouring real time and real money into a relationship that kept promising and never delivering, especially on nights I could have been home with my family instead. So I stopped participating in the sponsorship. I still get the invites every month, and now I just give them away to someone else that I know it's better fit for. So what I learned from both of these experiences is to be incredibly specific about where my time and my money goes in client relationships and in every relationship I'm investing in, not only for the sake of this business, but for my life too. Not everyone deserves that investment back. The people who are actually going to build something with you are decisive. They follow through and they respect what your time costs. If someone shows you over and over that they won't, believe them the first time, not the fifth time. So that might mean saying no to the coffee chat that isn't really just a coffee chat. It might mean ending a relationship that has been quietly draining you for months. It might mean deciding today that you are done pricing from fear. None of that is unkind. It is stewardship. It is you finally treating your time like the one asset that God gave you exactly once. And that deserves to be spent on the work you're actually called to do. All right, shine seekers, let's bring it home. 5 time truths. Your time is inventory you cannot restock. What you charge is a receipt for what you believe your hour is worth. Every hour you spend on someone who won't commit is an hour you take from someone who would. Your own indecision spends more of your time than any client ever will. And finally, protecting your time is stewardship, not selfishness. So here's what I want you to do this week. Pick one place where you already know you're bleeding time. That one client, that one task, that one decision you keep circling, and make the call. Not next month, right now, this week. I am so proud of you for showing up for your business, even on the days it feels like there isn't enough time to go around. There is enough time for the things you're actually called to build. You just have to be willing to protect it like it matters, because it does. As always, I'll leave you with this. What is the shine that you are seeking? Is it more hours in the day Or is it finally believing your hours are worth protecting so you can spend them on the business you were actually called to build? I'll see you next time. Shine on.